Good morning and welcome to Monday Manna. I'm your host, Frank Adams. So glad you tuned in today. For the last 2 weeks, we have been discussing the 3P mantra. The first P in this 3P mantra of leadership, we discussed people. And we discussed the value of people to the organization and how leaders respond and equip people. Last week, we looked at the second P in the mantra, which was the product. What product has God designed the church to produce? And of course, he makes that unequivocally clear in Matthew 28, that we're to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. That's the product that the church is to produce. In that Great Commission, the Lord presented 4 verbs or activities that the church would engage in that actually would produce the product of a disciple. Today we're going to look at the last P in the 3P mantra of leadership, and that is we're going to deal today with the process. So the 3P mantra consists of people, product, and process. Of all of these, the process is extremely important. Without a process in place, the other 2 P's will not come to fruition. Let's talk about the process. Process can be defined as a series of intentional actions directed toward a predetermined and specific end. Process is key to the success of any organization. Process is how things get done. Everything that is required gets achieved by a process being in place. Little will be achieved without a process that is put in place and is continually monitored for its effectiveness. Leaders will want to create a clearly defined process for achieving the 4 verbs of action spelled out in the Great Commission. Leaders will want to answer the following questions. How will my church actively achieve the 4 actions laid out by the Lord of the church? How many of the 4 actions are we currently involved in, and how are they getting done? What is the process for achieving those results? Let's look at each one of these verbs in the Great Commission in light of the process. The first verb in the Great Commission is the verb go. That means to take the initiative. The leader should ask, what activities and opportunities will the church initiate to equip its members and motivate them to share the gospel? What events will the church sponsor that will carry the gospel to the community? Who will lead those activities, and when will they be scheduled? Each church is as unique as the community it serves. If the church is to be involved in intentional evangelism throughout the year, a process must be in place, and in order for these activities to produce the desired end. A disciple, that is our product. That is the goal of the process. That is the blessing of the people that aid in accomplishing the process that produces the product. Disciples are active learners and faithful followers of Jesus Christ. So the first verb that needs a process is, how will your church create the process by which your church will take the initiative in carrying the gospel to your community? The second verb in the Great Commission is the word to baptize. To baptize has two meanings or purposes. The first is identification. We identify with Christ in his death and his resurrection. It is also an immediate identification with the church and the new believers' affiliation and commitment to that church. It also, in addition to speaking of identification, the word baptize also carries the connotation of assimilation. It is the church's responsibility to assimilate all newcomers and converts into the life and the process of the churches and its mission. There are a couple of growth stoppers in the church today. Ineffective equipping and ineffective assimilation are two of the most critical growth stoppers in many churches. Leaders, we must have in place an effective equipping and assimilation process in the church if we are to be successful. How does the church process new converts and newcomers? There must be a well-defined process in place, and that process must be active. Assimilation involves a great deal more than a friendly greeter at the door. How are you going to assure that assimilation has been carried out? What process will you have or do you have in place that assures assimilation is taking place? Newcomers don't come to church with a glued applied. It's up to the church to cause them to stick. What are you doing to assure that visitors and guests will return and become involved in active members? We need a clearly defined pathway of assimilation. That clearly defined pathway must be in place in the church, and everyone needs to be aware of what it is. How will the church process new converts? How are people offered membership? When and how and by whom will the Christian growth classes be offered? Is there a culture of involvement in the church? Or are people left to themselves to initiate class attendance or membership? A process must be in place that is adequate and clear and precise enough that people can understand the process and people can be processed from birth to the grave and everything in between. Leader, if a system is not in place and the process is not clearly defined and visible to everyone, people will eventually leave or fall into that dangerous, mysterious category called inactive. I'm of the opinion that either membership are first steps for converts, is the initiating step in the assimilation process. Do you have a clearly defined process of assimilation? Do you have a clearly defined process of membership in church growth? Do your leaders know that process? And is it constantly and frequently spoken of in your public assembly? It is essential that everyone know that there is a process, what are the steps in that process, and when and how that assimilation will take place. So that deals with the second verb in the Great Commission, which is baptize, which means identification with Christ in his death and resurrection and an assimilation into the church life. It is leaders' responsibility to set in place the process, the pathway by which newcomers become new members and new disciples and followers of Jesus Christ. Membership always involves a ministry. Is that process in place? It should be and needs to be. Let's look at the third verb in the Great Commission in light of a process being in place. The third verb in the Great Commission is teaching. The purpose of teaching is to bring to maturity, to be involved in ministry, and to create multiplication. The Lord wants his church to grow numerically, spiritually, and organically. And growth is a result of proper nutrition. What processes are in place to bring believers from immaturity to maturity? What is in process of bringing newcomers into membership and to ministry? How do believers discover their spiritual gift and their place of service? What is the process of ministry involvement and membership? All of these are to be well defined and in place for all to see. The fourth verb in the Great Commission, and as it applies to process, is observing, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. What does obedience look like? Is there a process of correction or discipline in your congregation? Has it ever been used? What about church attendance and tithing? What are the church's expectations of new members? Are they clearly defined? Are they covered in the membership process? If you know, you should know that he that is righteous will practice righteousness. And we need to teach people how to practice righteousness. Pastors, leaders, the 3P mantra can prove beneficial to your leadership as you consider and implement what goes on into the work of the ministry. The word process and systems are synonymous and interchangeable in my thinking. A system is a set of principles or procedures by which something is achieved. So you should take all of those things that are involved in the Great Commission and establish clearly defined processes by which those will be achieved. These things will assure your church will mature and grow and will be able to keep more of the harvest than it loses. That is the 3P mantra: people, product, and process. I hope these are beneficial to you. Appreciate your tuning in from week to week. Be sure and take a moment to comment, to like, to share. subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll appreciate it very much. I'm your host, Frank Adams. God bless you. Have a great day.